Okay, welcome everybody to our panel on recruiting in the new age, which is an absolutely fascinating topic, as many of you know, because a lot of you have been through probably more business transformation in the last 120 days than you probably have in most of your careers. I certainly have. And not only have we in the United States lost 35 or 40 million jobs, but there are 10 or 11 million jobs open. So we're in a simultaneous furlough, job replacement, recruiting industry. And one would have expected in a lot of economic times like this that the recruiting market wouldn't be that hot, but it actually is. There's just an amazing amount of demand for critical skills, new roles, people moving from companies to companies and from job to job. And so what we have is a panel of 5 very expert, very interesting, experienced talent acquisition and talent management professionals to talk to you about this. And we're going to ask them some interesting questions and hear what's going on and learn also about this whole issue of remote recruiting, remote onboarding, remote management of people. And then we'll open it up to questions. So let me go around and I'll have them each introduce themselves to you and tell us your role, a little bit about your background in recruiting and what are some of the big things going on in your company, and then we'll come back and ask some questions. Ted, would you like to start?
Sure. My name is Ted Neward. I currently work as the Director of Technology Culture at Quicken Loans, same folks that bring you Rocket Mortgage. And my background actually is much more on the technology side than the recruiting side. I've been an architect and a speaker and so forth at a variety of different conferences all around the world. And currently, my role at QL is to look at our technology teams and figure out how we take things to the next level, part of which includes recruiting, finding great talent and encouraging them to stay.
Great. Okay. And by the way, Quicken Loans is not Quicken.
That is
a lot of people don't know that.
Correct.
Can you just explain that to everybody so they understand what the company really is? Because it's a much different company than people probably know.
Yeah, so Quicken Loans is actually one of the family of companies that is owned by Dan Gilbert, the same guy who owns the Cleveland Cavaliers. My understanding of the company's history actually is that the name derives from a time when we were a part of Intuit, which is the company that makes Quicken, the personal finance software, as well as TurboTax. But Dan bought out Quicken Loans from Quicken a few years later and negotiated a deal where we could keep using the name even though we were fundamentally a different company. So it is a little confusing, but that's, in a nutshell, that's the history.
Well, and I just want to mention from my experience with you guys, I remember interviewing your one of your early heads of HR. It's a very innovative, creative, highly engaging organizations from what I've heard. So
when I first started there,
differ with me.
Well, when I first started there about a year ago, I've known people who've worked there for about a decade and a half. And when I first started about a year ago, my first reaction was, holy crap, this is a cult. But it's actually a good one. We have a very, very strong culture, which is centered around what Dan Gilbert calls the isms, which are 19 phrases that people repeat on with near religious fervor. But they're all really strong, good, strong philosophies. One of them is we'll figure it out, which really helps deal with a lot of the analysis paralysis that grips other companies. Innovation is celebrated, but execution is worshipped. It's good to have good ideas, but following through on those ideas. And these are basically pithy sayings that Dan had been repeating for years that just sort of formed the fabric of the culture. So it's a hell of a fun company.
That's what I've heard. So we're going to want to ask you a little bit about how you use that in the talent acquisition process too. So Andrew, sure. We've talked before. Andrew's from Schneider Electric. A lot of you on the video may not know Schneider Electric, but Schneider Electric is one of the most innovative companies I've ever run across. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the company and then about your role, because you have a pretty interesting role there.
Sure. Hey, Josh, and thanks for the intro. So I lead talent digitization at Schneider Electric, bringing AI, machine learning, new technologies to our HR sphere. I also lead employer branding and university relations, but that's a different topic. Schneider is one of the world leaders in energy management and industrial automation. We do everything from the switches that you have at home to nuclear power plants. So anything that has to do with energy management and industrial automation, and lots of innovations in that space, especially around newer energies. And lots of innovations in the HR space around recruiting, around AI in recruiting, around machine learning, as I said. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
Well, and I mean, I think one of the things I've learned about you guys, having met your former CHRO and a lot of your team, is that you're an industrial company that runs itself in maybe one of the most innovative talent practices that I've discovered. So, you know, you might want to just mention a few of the things you guys have kind of pioneered there that might be interesting for people to learn about.
Sure. I think one of the most exciting and pioneering projects that we've launched about 2 years ago is called the Open Talent Market, that uses AI and machine learning to match the supply and demand of talent within Schneider. And I can tell you that in light of COVID, this has come very, very handy, because we've been trying to rebalance all this bandwidth that our employees have, or some have not. So, yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit more as we get into the whole issue of recruiting. That's essentially taking the recruiting function and the internal talent mobility function and figuring out how to match them up,
Right.
which is a big opportunity. Okay, Sarah, I don't need to tell people who Uber is, but I'm sure there's a lot of interesting things going on there. If you could tell us a little bit about your role and what are some of the big things going on at your place that I'm sure all of us would like to hear about.
Sure. So I'm Sarah. I'm a principal technical sourcer at Uber. I focus on data science leadership, but in the last 10 years, I've worked on a number of technical searches. Uber is constantly changing and growing, and right now we're looking at how to change technical recruiting during these times. So I just left an ideation session with my team on how we'll be adjusting technical recruiting going forward. But I don't know.
Will you tell us a little bit about that, but we'll go around the circle and then come back to you. Steve, you were one of the first people at LinkedIn, I think. I don't remember how you got there, but tell us a little bit about your background and all the things you've done and your role these days.
Sure, Josh. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Steve Cadigan. Been in human resources for almost 30 years. In fact, my first role out of college was recruiting in the fashion industry, and worked in lots of big companies. And my last regular job, I was the first head of HR at LinkedIn. We were about 5 years old, about 400 people. And I worked there for about 4 years. It felt like 50, honestly. We doubled in size every year I was there. We doubled revenue every year, and it was just in the shadows of some really sexy brands. So we had to innovate to recruit. Failure wasn't an option when your main product is a recruiting product. But the last 5-6 years, I've been focused on helping organizations build compelling talent strategies. And that has allowed me to go around the world and learn some things. I also sit on the board of directors and advisory board for a number of companies in the HR universe, some in the recruiting world, some in training and coaching and so forth. So yeah, busy guy.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Steve's got a lot of interesting perspectives on the marketplace also. Paul, thank you for sponsoring this. Tell us a little bit about Filtered and about your role and what's going on in your guys' company.
Thanks, Josh. So Paul Bilodeau, co-founder and CEO of Filtered. We're a skill-based hiring platform. So think no resumes and no job descriptions. But what's happening with us? We're a smaller team, but we have our fingers on the pulse in terms of what everybody's doing, and in terms of trying to help with this transition from the norm, the day-to-day, to all of a sudden there are process is completely fractured because of what happened. So the first, first day of shelter in place was basically, okay, there are no more final round interviews. What happens? So we did a hackathon, put something into place for live interviewing with real whiteboarding and, basically a terminal to do paired programming in real time, just to help our companies, our customers to move to the new world. It's something that we've been pitching the whole time. If you go to our website, it is not apply online, it's interview now, and it's been like that for over a year. I think it's just the future forward, and we're no longer competing with inertia in the new world. Great.
Okay, well, we're going to want to hear more about that. Sarah, I think I'm going to start with you. What is the really new world of recruiting right now? What are you guys trying to do next? And what do you think other people can learn from you, or what are some of the problems you're trying to figure out how to solve? Just maybe keep an open-ended question like that.
Sounds good. So I guess how I ended up on this panel is related. I've been talking with the Filtered folks about ways to improve technical recruiting even before COVID started. So we're coming against challenges like live whiteboarding. It's pretty challenging to do without an actual whiteboard in a room. We're looking at whether or not it's a necessary part of the interview process, but also coming up with new ways to assess candidates. We're hoping that as more candidates become open to take-home assessments and online like technical assessments in general, because I think we probably all worked with candidates who thought that they didn't need to do that kind of thing. We're hoping it'll open up to more diversity. So I really want us to have tools that enable us to send an assessment and have it graded automatically, so that it's not putting too much burden on the teams to grade the assessments, but we're able to see, okay, this person who maybe didn't have the background that we thought was necessary for the role did really well on this assessment, so maybe we should move forward in the process with them. But in addition to that, also looking at randomly assigned graders from our company, because I know myself, I can be a little bit biased toward sending assignments to specific graders because maybe they're fastest, maybe they're easier, I don't know, different reasons. And then also having a blind review from the grader so that the grader can't see the candidate's name, location, education, and they're only reviewing the assessment. So these are things that I think will be really important going forward, because we'll have so many more assessments to review, but I'm also hoping it will really enable us to have a more diverse workforce.
Now, you made a comment. Let me ask you a question about diversity for a minute. Is the fact that it's a graded assessment in and of itself hurting diversity, or what do you think about the process is getting in the way of diversity in technical recruiting?
I think there's a lot of bias in tech, and just for someone to receive an assessment, their resume has to be given the thumbs up by a hiring team in most cases. So being able to send an assessment and have it graded automatically, so it's not putting the burden on the team to review, I think would improve diversity.
Okay, so that removes bias.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's reminiscent of the San Francisco Symphony story, which I'd be willing to bet many people in the attendee list are familiar with. But for those who aren't, when the San Francisco Symphony was trying to address diversity amongst their musicians, what they found was the most effective way was to put the auditioning member behind a screen, so you could not see the race or gender or any of the characteristics of the person. All you could hear was the music. And after they did that, son of a gun, they started to diversify. So that anonymization is absolutely a crucial element to help avoid unconscious bias.
You know, and yeah, I'm curious. Let me dig into this just a little more. Andrew, when I met you guys early on, one of the first things I heard about from Schneider was diversity. And the story started with a French company trying to not act like a French company, was the story I heard. So you've been way down this path for a number of years in a big way. How do you guys recruit technical people or otherwise and try to keep the candidate slate diverse and unbiased at the scale you have to do it?
Right. So I think at the moment we're not at you know, the envisioned future that Sarah was talking about, which is it automatically goes from, you know, the system to an automated assessment. We definitely would like to get there. It's in the pipeline. I think there are many things that happen. First, we ensure that we have a diverse slate. We ask our recruiters to make sure that we have a diverse slate, because we definitely don't want all of our technical hires to be the same copy paste as each other. And I think that there are lots of diversity in the hires that we get, especially here in the US. So it's not very complicated to do that. You just need to make sure that it's happening. Of course, and we learned that from the open talk, you start removing the bias because the technical tool that you can use can remove the bias, especially when you're not entering some of this data that could make sure that the system is biased or unbiased. You know.
So Steve, let me talk to you about that a little bit. You're a little bit like me. You're sort of more of an analyst. You know what a lot of the different technologies do. How do companies today, especially in Silicon Valley or otherwise, make sure they're getting a diverse slate? And then how many companies actually take this seriously and actually can use these tools? I mean, is this just a good idea, or are we actually getting to a point where this stuff works?
Well, Josh, I mean, gosh, every country that I spent a lot of time, and I spent a lot of time in Spain, they're struggling with it there. As an American, exporting and speaking and teaching in like Mexico and other parts of the world, they think in Silicon Valley we have a big problem with diversity because it's been in the news a lot. And frankly, I wish I had a bigger list of companies that I could say are really showing us the way. One of the things with all the the protesting that's happening right now, which I hope is going to lead to, is more commitment to do more than lip service to a diverse agenda. I saw an incredible note from Best Buy that was sent out by the CEO, who looks like the twin sister of the Prime Minister of New Zealand, coincidentally. But she said, we are going to build these technical preparedness centers, hundreds of them around the country in low-income areas, to grow and address skills for diverse people as part of their, not just their philanthropy budget, but for fueling their jobs. And I think that, when you can get, Cisco did this a little bit with network academies when I was there, where you have, network academies growing talent to service your products, but also going into very low income parts of the world. So there are some stories. I think people are still struggling to come to terms with, like, what is a good practical way for us to deliver on this? And the more stories that we can have to share showing the success, the more people can move from, well, there's our head of diversity, waiting for your lead, to this is how we're going to really do it and operationalize it. But I wish I had more stories of success.
Well, Ted, what do you guys do in this area? I mean, how do you do, I don't know if this is one of the things on your list, if the diversity issue is a big one for you guys on the tech, but you're a very forward-thinking company. I know that. So what has been your strategy and success at this?
So, part of this is just, again, woven into that cultural fabric, right? Dan Gilbert made a very visible, very public, and very heartfelt commitment to the city of Detroit when Quicken Loans moved into the downtown area. And, for the last decade and a half, 2 decades, they've been steadily revitalizing the downtown area, and that helps, right? But QL is now reaching a point where we need to be more of a nationwide company. And, It's hard to say, that there is any one thing that is specifically geared around diversity and inclusion. And in some respects, that's probably a good thing because, you run across, let me back up. Let me give you an example. Technology culture within QL, we are running a external speaker series. We are bringing people virtually into the company, thought leaders from within the computer science space, to talk to, conduct 4-hour workshops over Zoom for our technology team members. And we begin by saying, who are the brightest voices in the space? But then we also look at that list and say, all right, now which of these will actually reflect our cultural values? And in many respects, we've had one gentleman who was Indian, we've had one gentleman who was Caucasian, and the next one that will show up will be a woman. We didn't select them because of their demographic, but at the same time, we wanted to make sure that the people we select reflect the fact that, we're a diverse 2,000 strong collection of technologists. The whole company is like 30,000, I think. Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure that the people we're putting in front of our team members are the ones that, reflect the overall membership of the team. It's not, this is not a space where you can just say, here's the algorithm, now everybody repeat, right? It really has to be kind of tuned to every organization and their particular situation.
Well, let me ask you an adjacent question, and then I want to go back to you, Paul, and ask you guys about your stuff. With the isms, I've read the book of isms. I actually have a copy of it. How do you assess that stuff in technical people? And then I want to hear that from Sarah.
That's, it's interesting because in many respects, we don't, like I said, there's no algorithm there. With all due respect to the data science, AI, and machine learning crowd, you're never going to have a machine be able to determine whether or not somebody will believe in the ism of, we'll figure it out. At the same time, though, and I've only been with the company for a year, so it's hard for me to say with any real, empirical, statement, these are the things that we do. But whatever Dan has done, he's done it very successfully because, I've been a technologist for close on to 3 decades now. And QL is a company where these are genuinely good people. These are just really good people. I don't mean smart. I mean, their hearts are all very much in the right place. Mm-hmm. And you just don't see a lot of the political backbiting that you do see at other firms. It was uncanny to me how much I get into a meeting with somebody who arguably is in kind of the same space as my team, and where this could have easily turned into a turf battle, it was very much a, all right, let's figure out what's your take on it, what's my take on it, and then let's draw the line between where our 2 teams go so that everybody else kind of understands which one is for which. It's very collaborative. And I don't know that there's any one particular formula that I could point to say, this is what they did. But I think a lot of it comes from a degree of reflection, of thinking about what is really important to us, what are our values, right? And that notion of support and that notion of being able to articulate the isms, the philosophies, whatever your particular culture is, being able to articulate those in a manner that is easy for people to consume and understand.
Yeah.
If you're a company, think about creating your own isms. Yeah. This is, I think, what Andy Grove meant when he said culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. Paul, in your guys' business, I want to hear about your product and your technology strategy a little bit. You must have to deal with this type of question, or are you just doing technical assessment? And what are you guys building, and what are some of the creative ideas you have about increasing diversity and also understanding culture fit? And then I want to go back to you, Sarah.
Yeah, so there's a what and a why, and I think the product can talk about the what, which is removing the resume from the first step in the process, because all it really does is introduce a bias, whether it's like a false positive or false negative. And what happens when you remove that with our customers is all of a sudden you get diversity. It's like a ta-da moment. Oh,
Does remove the resume, I mean, maybe I'm just missed this. Does remove the resume mean you just put your name in and then you get an assessment and that's it?
you just go right into taking the interview right away. First step.
Yeah.
If you go to our job site, it's take an interview now. You start interviewing. You don't enter any personal information until you finished. And so.
This is how you do it, Sarah? You're nodding?
No, we don't
It's
do
on
that
Paul.
yet.
And
Tell us the perfect scenario. You just put your name in and an interview starts, huh?
you don't even put your name in. You start the interview. You don't put any personal information into it.
Okay.
But the why is a bigger issue. I mean, I think we spun out of a data science consulting company, and we've been teaching inner city youth coding for 48 weekends a year since. No, we don't put it on LinkedIn and our one day of volunteer work and promote it. We do this like that's because you can't. The problem isn't just the bias and removing the bias from the process today. It's a supply problem. Like if we're not teaching this from a young age and we remove computers from schools and we donated 1,000 computers to inner city schools in Boston, then it's a problem, right? You're not going to have that funnel of people. So like it's.
But don't companies just say, okay, well, if I can't find them in Boston, I'll find them in Budapest or I'll find them somewhere else, right?
Diversity, right? So like a company like Andela says, yeah, you can get diversity in Nigeria. So it's like, what do you mean? Diversity for US companies in Nigeria?
Yeah.
Well, that's not part of diversity. That's called labor arbitrage. That's outsourcing your work. So yeah, it's a topic that's near and dear, and we'll start with pilots with large companies, and we start with give us the last 60 days of candidates that you rejected based on your 8 applicant tracking system of matching keywords to a job description that 90% of the time the hiring manager didn't even write. And there's your first hires. And then, not surprising, it's that diversity. It's usually like the first 3 hires.
There, yeah. Sarah, what have you guys been doing in this area, in terms of understanding soft skills and also, do you like this idea of no resumes?
I think it's definitely going to have a huge impact if more companies start having such processes. I don't know how far away a company at Uber size is from doing something like that, but I hope it's something that we become more open to. In terms of how we go about assessing culture fit and improving the diversity of our culture, I think it comes down to folks on my team. The first conversations that we're having with candidates, I pride myself on being a very technical sourcer and being able to qualify someone's technical skills to an extent, even though I don't have a PhD in statistics or computer science. But I also have, a set of questions that I ask, especially for the leadership candidates I speak with, to assess how they will be as leaders. And so it's asking things like, how do you go about building a diverse team? What does diversity mean to you on your current team, or what do you want to see in terms of diversity in future teams? But also today I saw a tweet from somebody, Ashley C. Ford, and she said, if you're a hiring manager looking to hire a manager, you should ask them for an example of what it should look like when you apologize to an employee from a position of authority. I think asking questions like this early on in the interview process to understand somebody's character and how they will lead with humility is really important.
That's great. That's, it's good. It kind of warms my heart to hear you guys talk that way. Andrew, what is your, process for cultural assessment or cultural understanding, or and are you guys planning on doing away with resumes also?
Sure. I think first I want to add to what Sarah was saying. I think it's what Sarah said might definitely work for some sort of knowledge workers, but I don't think it really works for technical workers, because if you really need to remove the bias from technical hiring, you really need a process, you need a system. You can't just ask the question, how would you apologize? Especially if your idea is to have a non-biased approach, because I think that question already creates a bias. You have in mind something that you're waiting for. You know how they should be apologizing. So I think that also creates a bias. But for us in Schneider, I think culture is very diverse, as you can imagine. If we're talking local culture, we are present in 100 countries. So the local culture is very diverse. But as an organization, our culture is benchmarked on our core values. And these are around act like owners. A lot of the questions that we ask our prospective employees is around how do you act like owner? How do you make sure that things are getting done? How do you make sure that you can take accountability? Also about daring to disrupt, as you said at the beginning. Innovation is very important for us. If we are going to succeed in this very tough market, and if we're going to innovate, then we need to make sure that we can bring in new employees with a mindset of innovation that can dare to disrupt. So a lot of questions around how do you rock the boat? How do you make sure that this, you're not very comfortable with the status quo? And a lot of these sort of questions around our core values, because this really is the common culture that we have within the organization. And lots of questions on diversity. I mean, different questions in different places, but it's important for us to make sure that we can also bring in colleagues who are inclusive, because as you said, diversity is, and anyone who goes on our LinkedIn pages or on our Instagram sees that diversity is very important for us. But that diversity,
I think we lost Andrew.
Also continue any type of technical hires. Oh,
Josh, I've got this
I was going to go over
fun
you.
story. Yeah, I've got a fun story on this one. Julia Hartz, I saw her give a talk once on culture. And when you're recruiting, as Sarah is for talent, sometimes in the heart of San Francisco or Silicon Valley, you are in career candy store land. And as she was building the company, her bias was, I want to be a culture first. This has got to be a great place. But the company wasn't performing up to her standards. And this was a couple of years ago, I think. And she said she woke up from a nightmare one day saying, congratulations, Julia, you've just created the happiest, most mediocre company in the world. And what she thought was, we're spending all this time on ping pong and, sushi chefs and all this. But what she learned over time was a high performing organization was the culture her people wanted more than anything. And so, but the other thing about culture, which is kind of tricky in the recruiting process, is I believe today, your ability to morph and change as an organization is critical. So if your culture pillars are too static, you may be hurting yourself by going hard after those pieces versus hiring people to come in to grow your culture. And so that's where Julia is today. She says, I want a culture that's constantly changing and adapting and adjusting with us, our customers, and our marketplace. But it's, I worked for Jeff Weiner for 4 years, and he said, whenever I see a poster on the wall about culture, I want to throw up in my mouth.
Yeah.
He goes, that I want someone to feel it in their heart and in their minds. And we shouldn't need posters, for that. So it was an interesting, I'd never seen an executive.
Well, there was somebody once said to me, and I never forgot this, that the company becomes the people don't become the company. So it's who you hire that makes you who you are, not the other way around. So which leads me to another question I wanted to ask you guys. With all of this tech and, removing whatever we do with the resumes, I don't know how that's going to work, but you guys can tell me. What happens to the job of the sourcer and the recruiter? Some people out there think that job's going to go away and it's all going to be AI and automated and whatever. I tend to really doubt that, because I've also talked to companies that told me the most predictive factor in a great hire is the recruiter that knows how to hire people well. I remember hearing that from Schlumberger years ago. So
Well, let's level set one thing real quick, right? Because you see this all the time, right? And AI right now is on its third generation of, we promise AI will transform the world, right? Back in the 60s, back in the 80s, and now in the 2020s, AI was going to, completely change everything. And what we found is that AI is good at some things, but we are still a long ways away from HAL 2000. And, even though we have, these voice chat interfaces, the ability to be able to do some reasoning that is, beyond that which humans do, the ability to be creative, the ability to understand people at a human level, there will always be humans in that mix. Now, the whole notion of, this gets to this idea of technology will replace jobs. That has been true for the last 150 years. As a matter of fact, I would argue it's been true for the last 2000. And every time technology replaces a job, we find that there are a couple more jobs that are required to support that technology. Right? You think about all those people that, used to be blacksmiths and would shoe horses because everybody needed a horse. We don't have as much need for horseshoes anymore, but strangely enough, all these cars require a vastly larger supply chain to keep them running as opposed to a horse. What technology giveth, technology also requireth in greater demand. And so I don't know, will there be recruiters and sourcers? Absolutely. Will they be doing the exact same thing they do today? Probably not. They might be using a different set of tools. They might be engaging with candidates in a different way. But, you can have the world's most perfect assessment. And with all apologies to Filtered and Paul, you can have the world's most perfect assessment that will still not answer one of those fundamental human questions, which is, could I work with this person? And that's where all of this culture stuff really starts to boil down. You need to have a human reassurance. And I think the best plans are, let's let the AI do as much of the objective assessment as it can, but let's also not turn away from the idea that there is some level of subjective assessment. And as long as there are humans in the world, there will always be some level of humanity involved in this process.
Go ahead, Sarah. Yeah.
Sorry. Let's not forget about candidate experience either. Yes, the recruiter or sourcer does a good job at helping the hiring manager determine if this person's going to be a good culture fit after the technical assessments, or at the same time as the technical assessments are going on. But candidates have options now more than ever. Despite there being a lot of layoffs in tech recently, there are a ton of companies that are still hiring. And so,
Wicked's one, we're hiring.
Candidates don't get recruited by robots. They get recruited by people.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between internal talent acquisition and staffing, external staffing vendors. We work with both. And the average pass rate for a third-party staffing agency is 7%. So, and internally, it's 41%. Right. So, I think the staffing agencies, I think automation is going to be like a kayak for travel. But I think for internally, humans are a part of the process. We're just telling you, we're giving you the signals on technical ability. We can't determine culture, but talent can, because even you don't have to be technical to know your culture. And so I think it's a recruiting coordinator where you're like, if depending on how this rolls out in terms of going back to the office, recruiting coordinator really does a lot of scheduling, really walks the final round interview and grabs all the people and does the gathers feedback afterwards. If we don't go back to the workplace, that job's gone. But I think talent acquisition actually through this has a more major role
What do you guys think? One of the questions I know has been a burning question in recruiting forever is the ability for hiring managers to learn how to interview or screen people or whatever role they play in your company well. What have you seen in that area? Once you get through this technology-based assessment, and let's suppose it is neutral and you get these great candidates in there, but they eventually have to talk to people. How do you prepare them? How do you make sure they know how to do this? How do you make sure they take it seriously? I was in a meeting with a bunch of talent acquisition people, and they said, we're tired of being told that we're responsible for hiring these people. Actually, we can only take them so far. They are going to have to work for these managers eventually. Anybody want to chime into that?
Yeah,
Sure.
I'll take it. We had this just huge challenge recruiting in the early days of LinkedIn. And the problem is always going to, if you ask any recruiter, what are the best roles you filled and what happened? And they will always tell you, I had a great hiring manager who was fully engaged. Instead of here's a job description, which is my license to whoop you when you don't find someone that has all those specs.
Right.
Well, our challenge with our hiring managers in the LinkedIn days was the close, like closing and selling. And everyone was just admitting defeat. And so we organized with the CEO, the head of engineering, head of product, closing training sessions where we would sit down with Jeff and he'd say, okay, what are all the objections you struggle with when a candidate says something to you? And here's how I would handle that. So we would just have these brown bags with them repeatedly. And that started to raise belief. It started to raise confidence in doing that. But if you have a recruiting function that's indexing all ownership on recruiting, you're destined to have some problems if the hiring manager is removed from that. Sorry, Ted, I think I interrupted you.
Well, I was just going to say too, there's I think a couple of myths that are pervading in the technology space. One is the myth of the full stack developer, that I can find a developer who is familiar with every aspect of the stack. The other is the idea of the full circle manager, that I'm going to have management that will be great technologists, great psychologists, great recruiters, great salespeople, great marketing. I mean, good freaking heavens. If you find one of those, please let me know. But in the meanwhile, continue your search for the unicorn as you wish. I mean, to a certain degree, part of the whole notion of how a company is built is the idea of taking disparate parts and plugging them together so that the sum is greater than the whole. And yes, you are going to need to meet with the hiring manager, because as a candidate, you want to know who you're going to work for. You want to know who you're going to be engaged with. I mean, if you think about it, you spend as much time with your coworkers as you do your spouse. I mean, if you work a normal 40-hour work week and you sleep another, 8 hours a day, the numbers really, really start to come very close. I kind of want to know who the person is that I'm going to be working for, because, I didn't marry my wife blindly and I wouldn't want to work with somebody blindly. But there are areas of specialization, and I think recruiters can really, having a strong partnership with your recruiting team can make your life so much easier, in the same way that anybody who's ever been an author or anybody who's ever been on stage at a Broadway play, having people who can look at you and give you some feedback and coach you and talk to you about areas in which they are, specialists. We have some of the most amazing athletes in the world on the football field. Well, not right now, we don't, but they still require coaches. They still have people who can teach them how to do things better. I think all of these things, to look at your recruiter and say, hey, I have this job description and I now have, what was it, Steve? A license to whoop you? Is that? Yeah. I'm actually going to print up license to whoop, and I'm going to put that on my wall. That, if you're looking at it like that, you're missing the point, right? The recruiters are there literally to help you, and so you need to figure out how to help them help you. It's got to be a partnership. Otherwise, it's just.
And in the same way that I tell people, if you're looking for work, if you're starting to look for a job when you've lost your job, it's too late. If you're starting to recruit when someone quit, it's too late. Like this, I think we need to change the perspective to ongoing. This is what I love about what Paul and his team are building, which is, You know, we're not looking to fill a job with a skill. We're looking to find talent and open up your eyes to what that talent can do in different ways so that you can see your portfolio different than this job description and this person, you know?
Yeah.
Paul, tell the story you told me of you were working with a client and they said, we want to look for this person. You ran through your process and showed there were so many people they were letting go because of how they were looking at resumes or how they narrowed their focus, right?
Yeah. I mean, I like what, I guess one of the big stories out of this was removing a job description from a Fortune 50 company for matching. Because we asked questions around, well, first, we found out that 90% of the hiring managers in the org didn't write the job description. And so you had an army of recruiters, external and internal, searching on key skills that weren't required. And so the other piece was there's 411 jobs with the same skill for 411 different hiring managers. And if you applied for one job and made it to a final round interview and you came in second place or you weren't a fit, you would have to go through the process again. And so like, all right, well, what if they passed a filtered in that core skill set and then we funneled them to every hiring manager in the org that had that job open for that core skill? Well, then you took interview to hire, like what's your time to fill from 117 days to 11 business days.
Yeah.
Technically, we weren't.
Uber, Sarah, do you guys do that?
Some of the departments do, not all. I'm definitely a big advocate for centralizing, you know, at least earlier stages of the interview process across data science specifically, but engineering too. I think if you can pass the technical assessments early on and then do team matching later, it's why, you know, larger companies like Google and Facebook are, you know, able to hire more quickly and not lose candidates later down the process because of these things. You know, if it doesn't work out with a specific team, they don't have to start all over.
Yeah, and this is where I think we go back to the notion of where human in the mix can be really helpful, because if I work with a recruiter and they can get to know me and they can see the assessment, they can say, you know, I know you put yourself in for this position A, but looking at you, talking to you, I think you could actually be a good fit on teams B or C. Would you be interested in talking to them as well? And that kind of shepherding and guidance, and, you know, the candidate feels like the recruiter is working with them as opposed to a gate they have to get past. That's huge. Going back to Sarah's notion of candidate experience, that's an absolute huge win for an organization.
Let me ask, there's a question here that I think we need to cover, just given the state of where we are in the world. What has happened with remote recruiting, remote onboarding, remote interviewing that's working and not working? How have you managed the remote nature of all this? Who wants to start there? Andrew, I'll give you a chance to start since you haven't talked for a minute.
Sure. I think we've pivoted around everything that has to do with recruiting, onboarding, with internal mobility. We've pivoted everything to, I mean, even when you look at university recruitment and all of that, everything has pivoted towards digital, towards online, towards remote, because in most cases, you cannot meet people, so you can't have a one-on-one interview. So we're resorting a lot to these tools. Now, the good thing is, I think that it's working, and it is efficient, and it is scalable. And I think that it is something that is there to stay. Of course, I concur with what Sarah was saying and Ted was saying around, we're humans. We want to see a recruiter. We want to see a human interaction. That's true. But also, in many cases, in most cases, the remote techniques are working. And they're fast and
Let me ask you a question on that. So we've been in this remote world for 3 or 4 months. So you probably have situations now where you sourced them remotely, interviewed, assessed, hired them and onboarded them, and they've never been in an office with anybody. Is that all working? I mean, I've done this as a small company, but I've never run a big company.
Right. So I think we need to take a step back here because we need to think of a few things. One, since this, as you know, we're a global company. So for many people, this crisis started in March. For us as Schneider, we started feeling the crisis in January because this is where China, which is our third biggest market, shut down. So things started slowly. I mean, the hire freeze started there and then went across the world. So there was a hire freeze, which means that even though we are pipelining, we are looking at assessments, we're not necessarily hiring. If you were already hired and the critical ones were onboarded remotely, those that were deemed not critical, we reached out and agreed on a later date for a start. Because of course, when you're talking of onboarding, you want to meet your manager, you want to get your laptop from someone, you want to go on your VPN with someone who shows you how to do it. It's not as easy as sending you a laptop home. And here in the US, we're pretty fortunate because it is easier than other places. But good luck sending a laptop home to someone in Egypt. So it's not as easy, but I think it can be done for critical, especially on the interview side, more than on the onboarding side. This is where it gets harder.
Sarah, what are you guys doing to deal with all the remote stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's the same thing. The biggest challenge has just been the logistics, getting people their equipment in time, making sure that their bandwidth is up to par, which I think we're all struggling with these days. But yeah, I think it's possible to get remote folks onboarded, and certainly hiring is happening across tech, at least here in the US. And, you know, it's happening, but there are just some logistical issues.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things, QL, we've been hiring some folks. As a matter of fact, we have several hundred folks across the entire company that are starting in a week and a half, which includes 150 interns that are beginning the start of their internship, a fully virtual remote internship for 2.5 months, I think is the length of the internship program. Yeah. And, you know, I need to take a second and shout out props to the Quicken Loans infrastructure folks. Our desktop team is what we call them, because the entire company pivoted from a company that was pretty much office first with several, 20 some odd thousand people coming into the offices in Detroit. We pivoted in the span of a week to have everybody working from home when the shutdown order came into Detroit. And it was exactly that logistical setup that Sarah and Andrew are referring to. I mean, laptops went out. Now, Quicken Loans is not an international company. We deal with mortgages inside the United States, so we don't struggle with some of the issues that Andrew was talking about, with Egypt and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But that is, I mean, right now, on Monday, June 15th, several hundred people will go through Jumpstart, which is our onboarding program. They will do it entirely virtually. And for some of these folks, they've never set foot in our office. One of the interns who will be reporting to my team is actually out of Arizona. And he's never, I mean, where a year ago we would have flown them to Detroit and put them up in university housing at Wayne State, we'd be doing it out of his, bedroom or his office. And I think the jury's still out as to how well we're doing it. I think, we're doing quite well as a business. Everybody and their brother is coming to talk about refinance, so that's good. Yeah. But I think it's a much longer term calculus that, that we'll need to weigh out. So at least from our perspective, talk to me in 3 months, talk to me again in 12 months to see how well that we've really done it. But it can be done. It requires a tremendous amount of effort to do it. And not everybody will be in a position to be able to do that. We've been fortunate that we could, but it's definitely not easy. No question. No question.
One of the heads of talent at Microsoft I was talking to the other day said, because they're doing the same thing, they have a lot of interns, and it's a very important part of their talent pipeline. And he said, we have a very formal, structured, always on intern channel that is always staffed by a senior manager. So any intern can get on the channel and find somebody at Microsoft to talk to at any time if they can't reach their manager. And I thought, well, that's a really good idea, because sometimes your manager's not there and you're just sitting at home and like, now what?
Yep. And it will be interesting too, because I'll be seeing it from both ends, because my eldest son is actually one of these Quicken Loans interns. So it'll be very interesting to kind of see it from both sides, you know, both being, working with the intern program as to how all 100 some odd of those interns work inside of Rocket Technology, but also watch it from his side. You know, like I said, ask me in a couple of months, I'll tell you how well that worked.
Okay, you guys, we got 3 more minutes. I think what I'd like to do is go back around and let you each take a minute or two, take, you know, as much as you'd like. We can go a little bit over. People hopefully will hang around a little bit and say, you know, of all the things that have happened in the last 3 or 4 months to transform recruiting, what's the biggest thing you've learned that you think other people could learn from? Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Sarah, go ahead.
I think the biggest thing that we're learning is that remote work can work, and that we could be more open to hiring technical talent to work remotely permanently, or to work in offices that we didn't have technical talent in before. You know, if we were to start building out our tech teams in Dallas or Chicago, these things could also improve diversity at our companies.
Great. Okay, fantastic. Steve?
So most organizations that I've worked at have this dynamic of headquarters and field. And I think what has happened that I think will help every organization come to grips with is everyone's in the field now. You know, Ted, you mentioned this the other day when we were prepping, and I heard Aaron Levy, the CEO of Box, talk about this, that his executives who are remote are not missing the insider headquarters stuff. And I think as it pertains to, you know, connective tissue longer term, I mean, it's just a great skill to be developing right now.
Yeah, yeah. I remember the behavior that the people on the conference call and aren't in the meeting, kind of you just blow them off.
Or you forget they're there. Yeah.
You don't even talk to them. Yeah. Andrew,
well, even just the basic etiquette of all the side conversations, which you know is kind of rude to do in a physical in-person meeting, but then when you're remote and you're trying to listen and you're hearing everybody just jabber, it causes you to check out completely.
Yeah. Andrew, what about for you guys?
Sure. I think the biggest learning for me, and I think for us in HR at Schneider, is that HR tech investments are just that. It's an investment, and there is a return on investment when you need it the most. And I think that the biggest learning is that what we invested 2 years ago and a year ago, without knowing that, of course, we're going to be in this situation, really paid off in terms of remote working, in terms of assessments online, in terms, and I think this is a learning that we should share with others, that you need to invest in solid HR tech that could serve you in great times, but could also serve you in times like these that were unexpected. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Paul, why don't you close this up a little bit? Tell us about what you guys have learned, and then we'll say goodbye to everybody and thank you.
Thanks. So right now we've been talking about distributed workforce, and I was always of the mindset that an early stage startup, or any startup, you had to be in the same office. Like, it's the side conversations when it's not scheduled, like the tactical strategic conversations. You're walking to the kitchen and you stumble on pricing, and we make, you know, like a headway. I've learned that it doesn't matter, that we can hope the board's not on here so we can still pay the rent. But, you know, I like to have a home base. I think it's just a smaller home base that you can go to when you want to. But we didn't miss a step. And it's just,
Great.
Yeah, that's where we're at. It's like totally contradicts what I would have said, you know, before the whole crisis.
Well, I want to thank you guys. We're out of time. There's just so many elements to this conversation about culture and assessment and diversity and remote work. But I would say what I'm hearing as a result of the last hour is that the human connection with you as the recruiter or the recruiting function or the head of HR and the candidates is still strong as ever and is more important than ever. And all this digital technology is helping a tremendous amount. And I just want to thank you guys for sharing all this. I learned a lot in the last hour, and I hope everybody on the line did. Paul, do you want to say any closing comments, or are we done here?
No, I thank everybody for showing up. We chose, helped choose the speakers because based on, their approaches to it, and we really respect everybody on the panel.
Great.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Thank you, Ted. I know Quicken Loans is hiring. They're probably all hiring. I don't know about you, Steve.
No.
So if you're a candidate, there's a few messages from candidates. I think you have some new contacts now to go reach out to too. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Josh.
Bye, everybody.
Moderating, Josh. And thanks, Paul.